Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next episode of the Players NIL Podcast and my special guest and business partner, Mr. Josh Rosen. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Well, it's great. You know, we've developed a nice relationship here in the last couple months in this crazy world of name, image, and likeness. And we're excited to have you as part of our advisory board, our academic team, number 2 pillar in our class schedule, influencer and brand relationship. And we'll dive into that a little bit. But I want to say, first of all, thank you and welcome to the Players NIL. We value you as a teammate and we appreciate your contributions to date.
Yeah, and I just want to take a moment to sort of express my excitement at the opportunity. You know, ever since we had kind of connected on LinkedIn and that's sort of the power of social media, I always felt there was a ton of synergy in sort of our mission to give back to athletes and to sort of educate and empower them. And so everything that the Players NIL stands for and will continue to become is just, it's so exciting to me. I see so much potential for growth. So I wanted to just sort of thank you, as we're going back and forth here, because it's a great opportunity and I'm really excited to be on board.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's reciprocal. So because we're a sports-minded brand and because one of our mission statements is to use athletics to better our lives and use athletics to better the lives of the people around us, I'd like to dive back into a little bit of your childhood and your early years, all that time ago. And tell me about your interest in sports and athletics and how you became a sports fan.
Well, I'll try and keep it pretty brief, but I am an only child in a single parent household. And my mom, from a very early point in my life, identified sports as a way to build relationships and to get real life experience. And so I remember being on every team: basketball, baseball, football, soccer. And I was never the most athletic kid. And I realized pretty early on that it was not going to be a professional career for me on the court, but it always captured my interest because I felt such an affinity to sports. Just, it meant so much to me. And kind of how I grew within basketball was right around my 7th or 8th birthday. I asked my mom for tickets to go see the Lakers. She went on to, I guess it was Ticketmaster at the time, saw that we could sit in the nosebleeds for the Lakers or we could sit on the floor for the Clippers. And she said, "We're watching the same team. We're going to go watch a basketball game." And ever since then, I have just been a diehard Clippers fan, which has been very, very difficult in LA for a long time. But sports, it's always been something that I've been able to talk about, been able to build relationships through. And throughout my entire career, when people would say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I always knew my answer was in sports. I have this expression I tell people I work with, my clients. I truly, and I've become more of a businessman throughout my career, but I started as a sports fan and a fan in sports business. You know, it was always, what's your team? What do you like? From a very early point, I always knew if I could ask someone where they were from and what their favorite sports team was, we were going to have something to talk about. And it didn't matter if they were a Nashville Predators fan or a Duke basketball fan. I was going to have some level of common ground with them to build a relationship. And fortunately, just kind of as sports works or as any business works, you're able to build relationships. You're able to really communicate with amazing people. And you look up and you're sort of in the business and everything finds a way to sort of work itself out.
Awesome. I love it. And shout out to Mom and for giving you that opportunity, because this, I always say it's, the 2 greatest things parents can give their kids are self-confidence and opportunity. And it sounds like she's done both. So shout out to Mom. So you have this passion, you have this interest, you enroll at the University of Miami. Tell us about your relationship with athletics while you were in college.
Well, my relationship with athletics in college was really trial by fire. And I wanted to experience everything. And I sort of had this mantra of, scouting is about eliminating, not about finding. And so what I mean by that is, for me, especially early on in college, it was going to be hard to say, I want that job. It was going to be a lot easier to say, I don't want that job. And so through that, I interned at every level imaginable. I interned for media outlets. I interned for our teams. I interned for our compliance department. I was an athlete tutor. And I found this passion as a women's basketball manager. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting in class and I saw the job listing go up from Mike Whalen, who was the video coordinator at the time. And I immediately called him and he said, and I asked, hey, is there an interview process? And he said, Josh, there's only one other guy who expressed interest and we need about 10 people. It's all hands on deck. If you want a job, the job is yours. And I was a sophomore at the time. I had spent my freshman year doing a lot of classic college jobs. I was a Jimmy John's delivery driver. I was a intramural referee. I was anything to try and make a couple of bucks to be able to go out on the weekends. And the decision to go into women's basketball my sophomore year was truly transformative. The first part that really stood out was the acceptance I felt from the coaching staff and from the players. And looking back, I can't thank them enough, because without them accepting me into their program and into their community, none of this would have been possible. And I think that's really important for athletes and for students and for anyone who's trying to go into business to understand, you got to work hard, but you also need a little bit of luck. And my luck was the women on that team accepted me. They saw the passion. They knew that I really wanted what was best for them. And I was able to be an assistant video coordinator my sophomore year. At that time, I thought I was still going to want to, be on a bench at the professional level. And I was able to, as I had mentioned before, just experience every part of what it means to be a part of a team. Not only the glamorous stuff like the doing laundry and the carrying the bags. I got to watch the coaches put together practice plans. I got to watch the support staff communicate with players and say, hey, do you want to get your strength work in today? How are you feeling? Do you want to go 100%? Does your body need to go 50%? And I was really able, for the first time in my life, to see how high level athletics is sort of operated on a day-to-day basis. So I was fortunate enough to be a part of that program for all the other 3 years of my college experience. I was a practice squad player. I was a manager. I was a special assistant to the coaching staff. And it gave me such insight into high level athletics, into women's basketball, into just elite, sports for lack of a better term. And really without that experience, I don't think anything, I've gone on to accomplish, which we're still very early stages, what would be possible.
Well, the enthusiasm is obvious, and you wear your passion on a shirt sleeve. So I'm sure that any employer or coworker fed off of that. And so you graduate from college. We'll fast forward. Tell us about TRG and what you're doing and who your clients think, what your clients expect from you, and a little bit about the business of being a relationship manager, an influencer manager, and the brand relationship and the student athlete and the professional athlete relationships that you're building.
Well, I'll try to sort of draw a through line from going to the Clippers games at 8 years old to doing laundry at Miami at 19. It was always about working and being a part of something that was exciting, something that got me up every day and made me want to be the best version of myself and really to add value. And that was a skill that I learned and a trait that has sort of been ingrained in me from the earliest stages of my life. And so TRG Sports is an extension of sort of what I want to be as an individual, which is someone that cares for the person, next to them, someone that is willing to go the extra mile, someone that's willing to over communicate. So TRG Sports started around 10 months ago. And initially it was an NIL agency. And the joke that I tell anyone when I'm on calls with them is it's undergone about 17 different variations since what it was initially. But it's always had that ethos of how can we add value? How can we under promise and over deliver? And how can we make sure that someone, when they work with myself, my agency, and my clients, come out of that experience saying, wow, not only was the work really well done, but the experience, the relationship we built is something that we're going to want to do again. So now currently TRG Sports has an NIL component. It has an influencer component. We consult with brands on how to build out their marketing strategies. And at its core, it's an agency where we want to work on cool stuff with cool people. And we tell athletes that we recruit, we tell brands that we talk to, we're not for everyone, and everyone may not be for us. And so I think, again, that's something that we talk about in our influencer relations course, which is authenticity is critical. And the analogy I give to every single client is, if you call me and say, Josh, I love peanut M&Ms, absolutely love peanut M&Ms. Well, if M&M's calls us and says, hey, we want to do a campaign, but we're not willing to pay your sort of rate, well, that's a totally different conversation than if a brand that you have no affinity to comes to you and says, hey, we want to work with you. At that moment, myself, my team, my clients have a conversation of, are we doing this because we want to check a box? Or are we doing this because it what fits best for the athlete and their brand? And so I think that's a critical component of what we do, because we're not trying to be perfect for everyone. It's not possible, but I've had that reality, come up in recent times. So TRG Sports is an NIL and influencer agency. It is a brand management company, and we're focused on how can we be the best versions of ourselves every day. How can we put our clients in the best position to succeed? And how can we grow something that's scalable and sustainable for the long term?
Love it. So NIL has created lots and lots of opportunities, but athlete relationships with brands and brands' relationship with athletics from a promotional standpoint has been around forever. But the world has changed now. So tell me a little bit about the brand's mindset. What are they looking for, and why are they interested in athletes? What's your take on that?
I think it's the same reason that sports live rights are incredibly valuable, which is sports and athletes still draw a tremendous amount of eyeballs. So from a marketing and appeal standpoint, that's sort of one component there. But what I think brands are most conscientious of is sort of what I'd referenced in my previous response, which is authenticity. I tell, and it's a part of my presentation, brands look at social media pages, and sure, they'll do a deep dive if it's the right opportunity, but oftentimes they're spending between 10 and 20 seconds looking at that page. And they're going to realize very quickly, is this an individual that is simply, again, to use that term of checking boxes, that are just accepting any campaign, that's just looking to get free stuff, that really doesn't have sort of a cohesive brand vision? Or is this someone where you can look at a page and very quickly decipher, what is this person about? What are their priorities, and how do they reflect those priorities in their day-to-day dealings? So brands at their core want to work with athletes that are genuine, that are willing to put in the work, that are willing to communicate, and that are willing to go the extra mile. And I've had that conversation so many times with athletes and influencers and anyone I work with, which is, you have to view this as a job. The same way you go on court, you don't, and listen, maybe you do. And if you do and you have success with this as an athlete or as anyone, great. It's tough to go through the motions and consistently perform at a high level. I was talking to a friend about this recently, where growing up, I think a lot of kids sort of have that mindset of, oh, well, I can flip the switch. I can be on when I need to be on. It's very, very challenging to sort of get to that point. It just is. And one of my clients tells me all the time, how you do anything is how you do everything. So my advice to athletes, my advice to anyone that sort of wants to figure out, hey, how can I put myself in the best position to succeed, is consistently do the little things the right way. When you put yourself in that position, you're not going to have to worry about the brand figuring out that dirty little secret you have, because they're going to say, you know what? Are they perfect? No, again, no one is. But if their brand is activism, if their brand is fashion, if their brand is whatever, make sure that you're reflecting that image in everything you are doing that is public facing. And last but not least, Mark, not to sort of go too long here, but I've told clients all the time, you can have a private page. I'm not saying that if your brand is activism and philanthropy, that every action and every moment of your life has to embody that. No, again, no one can expect to be on 24/7, 365. But when you're hoping to build a brand and build relationships in this business, everything you need to do needs to reflect what you want the brand to know about you. So if your brand is activism, make sure that every post, every opportunity, everything you're doing is reflecting the fact that you want to empower others and put them in positions to succeed.
I love it. You stole some of my thunder because your pillar is influencer and brand relationship, which will be our second release, which will be the second week of July. And I think it's an exciting one. It's one of the 5 pillars that we believe student athletes need to understand to maximize their NIL opportunities. And maximizing opportunities is different for everyone. You know, for the Division I point guard at Kentucky, you know, Power 5 quarterback in the SEC, that's one thing. For someone else, and I'm not going to name a school or a student athlete or a sport, it may be different. But the mentality is the same. That's your point. And the effort required and the thought process behind it. So when someone finishes pillar number 2, your pillar on the Players NIL 5-pillar course, what would be what you hope they take away? Give me a synopsis of they now have a direction. What is that direction?
At its core, I want my course to hopefully provide to every student athlete a basis of understanding to realize you don't need to look to your left or to your right to define your path. And sort of to the answer to the question or topic you had just provided, I don't even look at it as much as a glamour school or glamour market sort of thing, because anyone at any institution can have a different set of priorities. And again, that priority can be social media marketing, but that is one component of NIL. And people that take my course will realize there are a million ways to not only monetize an NIL, but to take advantage of the opportunities. You can activate at the local level. You can provide lessons to students in nearby areas. And 5 years ago, you couldn't do that. If you had a passion for coaching and you were like, hey, I want to do this. I want to help out the community. I want to show kids what it takes to get to the next level. You couldn't make money doing that 5 years ago. Now you can do that. You know, I have clients that have launched podcasts. Our podcast immediately revenue generating? No, of course not. But you know what? They're an opportunity to build a brand. And what, you know, we have a lot of exciting things in sort of our presentation. We have worksheets, we have activities. We want it to be very interactive. And I want anyone that takes the course at the end of it to sort of feel like they have their path defined and that they know the next steps to make sure that they're maximizing their NIL opportunities. Again, doesn't mean that people can't take advantage of social media, doesn't mean that you can't stand in front of that car or that store and hey, that's awesome. But limiting yourself to that takes away from the real value of NIL, which is it truly allows student athletes to prepare, to chart their futures, and to get real world experience that when you were a student athlete, when I was a manager at Miami with our student athletes, they did not have the ability to do. 5 years ago, 50 years ago, anytime before this legislation was passed, it is you are a student athlete. You are defined by those two terms. You are a student, you go to class, you are an athlete, you participate in athletics. Now, student athletes have the ability to be podcast hosts. They have the ability to be merchandise stores. They have the ability to be tutors and teachers, as I had already listed. There's so much more to do in addition to being an influencer. So we're going to go over that. We're really excited about it. I know I am. And it's, you know, again, anyone that is going to take the course is going to get a real insight into all the different ways you can maximize NIL and the steps you can take to make sure you're putting yourself in the best position for you and for anyone you want to deal with down the road.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking I'm ready to run through the wall for you, Coach. The coaching world doesn't know what it missed, but the Players NIL and TRG and your clients are certainly thankful. Josh, you're an inspiration. Your enthusiasm, your knowledge, and your commitment to student athletes is obvious, and that's why we're happy to have you as a partner. And we look forward to your class being released in July. And I just want to say thank you for being part of the Players NIL, and thank you for being my guest today.
Mark, I really, really appreciate it. And hi, Mom. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.